Next on Accident Investigator, a horrible pileup results in the death of a woman and her child. But the story becomes even more tragic when investigators reveal the true cause of the crash.
These people were just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Then, an old woman is found dead on the side of the road after disappearing from a family party. Was this the result of a freak accident or something more sinister?
One of the possibilities that we look at is if Mrs. Polinsky was possibly down on her knees or even laying down when this vehicle struck her.
And an accident investigator struggles to explain conflicting physical evidence at a crash site.
Tommy.
But the job takes a chilling twist when he discovers who the victims are.
This accident was an emotional struggle for me. I never actually had one involving a coworker.
Every year, violent collisions kill 3,000 Canadians and injure another 200,000. But there is no such thing as an accident. Every collision has a story as unique as the people involved. Rusty Haight is a leading authority on accident reconstruction. He trains investigators around the world to read the clues and solve the mysteries.
You can be driving carefully, the road clear, the weather perfect. You can still be involved in a collision. The other guy doesn't do something he is supposed to do, or does something he isn't supposed to do. You can still be in a crash. Now, there are a lot of things you can do to avoid a collision. First among those is to drive defensively and anticipate problem situations.
On a beautiful May afternoon, Laura Smith, a single mother, is taking her son Jason to his grandparents' summer house for the week. It's only an hour's drive from home. The day looks perfect for a relaxed trip out of town and a swim in the lake. Then, seemingly out of the blue, a motorhome in front of her brakes hard. Laura has no choice but to brake also. Meanwhile, a bus driving behind Laura is coming up fast and desperately trying to keep from slamming into her, but to no avail. Laura's small passenger car folds up like an accordion between the two large vehicles and immediately bursts into flames. Firefighters arrive on the scene and do their best to extinguish the blaze, but it's too late for Laura and her son. Despite the fact that it's his day off, accident investigator Don Carroll is called in by his supervisor.
It must have been a major accident for me to be called off duty to respond to the scene.
The scene is one of the worst Don has ever seen. The small passenger car is still sandwiched between the two larger vehicles and has been burnt down to its chassis. Don also learns that both mother and son have been confirmed dead. Although investigators may be used to dealing with the gruesome task of road accidents, the sight of the burnt bodies is devastating.
It's always tough when I respond to accidents such as this because I have several small children of my own, and anytime a child is involved in a crash, and in this case burned so horribly, it's very tough.
It's now Don's task to find out exactly why and how this terrible accident occurred. At the scene, he has 3 vehicles involved in the collision. Determining what part each of the drivers played in this tragedy is the first step.
I saw that the driver of the motorhome appeared to be in shock, so I decided to go to the bus driver, Miss Albright.
Are you okay?
Oh, I'm okay.
Monica Albright explains to Don that traffic was moving smoothly until out of the blue, the motorhome appeared to decelerate rapidly, forcing both Laura and her to brake sharply. She tried to stop in time, but just couldn't.
When I heard Miss Albright's statement, I was first thinking that maybe she was following the small passenger car too closely, and that's why she wasn't able to stop. But I also considered that something happened with the motorhome. Maybe an animal ran out in front of the car. Maybe the motorhome had a mechanical problem.
Next, a patrol officer informs Don that Mr. Peterson is ready to make his statement.
Mr. Peterson told me that a small red car passed him quickly on the left side, directly in front of his motorhome, and then started to drive more slowly. And then for no reason, the car slammed on its brakes.
Peterson insists to Don that he reacted quickly but couldn't manage to steer clear and hit the red car lightly from the rear. He thought he had avoided the worst, but a second later, he felt the impact of Laura's car from behind. He claims that the errant car stayed in front of him maybe a few seconds, but then the driver accelerated and disappeared.
When I heard Mr. Peterson's story about the red car that the other driver didn't report to me at all, I thought at first that maybe Mr. Peterson may not have been telling me the truth about it. So I knew I had to go look for damage on the front of the motorhome.
On this basically yellow and black transfer marks. I'm not sure what it's from, but it's not something I would expect to find on this pristine bumper. There's some indentations on the bumper like it hit another vehicle, but these yellow and black transfer marks are very suspect and possibly from another vehicle.
Don moves on to the scene investigation, looking for any other clue to confirm the presence of the mysterious fleeing car. The road is a mess of debris, but there's also a lot of skid marks, which is no surprise in a pileup like this.
Miss Albright told me it was like a domino effect, where the motorhome braked, the small passenger car braked, and then she had to brake. There was no advance warning.
Then Don picks up another clue. Just ahead of the motorhome, he notices 4 sets of skid marks. A quick look clearly tells him that these marks are still hot and that they don't belong to any of the other vehicles involved.
I thought that there definitely was a 4th vehicle involved, and then I contacted my dispatch center, who put out a be on the lookout broadcast to look for this vehicle that was involved in this crash.
If another car participated in the chain of events that led to the fiery deaths of Laura and Jason, why did he or she flee the scene? And what caused the accident to happen in the first place? The road evidence and Mr. Peterson's testimony lead Don to consider a brand new theory about the accident.
I thought there was a possibility that this may be an actual staged accident that occurred, because this type of accident fits the profile.
Every year in California alone, there's some $200 million in fraud perpetrated as a function of stage crashes. These aren't accidents, these are intentional events. What you got is a criminal that'll drive around and pull in front of a commercial vehicle or an expensive car, someone that looks like they have insurance. They'll stop suddenly, they'll get rear-ended. Now what you got is everyone in the rear-ended car is injured. They'll bring together a group of doctors and lawyers and, of course, witnesses who'll make this a very multidisciplinary, a multi-jurisdictional effort. That's what makes this such a difficult case to prosecute.
Coming up, Don enlists the help of a fellow investigator in the hopes of untangling this unusual case.
These people were just innocent people who were on their way to a party and got caught up in all of this.
A terrible accident on a busy roadway has claimed the lives of Laura Smith and her 5-year-old son, Jason. Investigator Don Carroll has been brought in to reconstruct the chain of events that led to their deaths. As a next step, Don requests a full mechanical examination of all the vehicles. But his priority is to find the red car that reportedly fled the scene of the accident.
This type of accident fits the profile, in which case a car slams on its brakes in front of a very expensive vehicle, either a commercial vehicle or a motorhome, a luxurious motorhome, because that is where there's deep pockets, where there's a lot of insurance money that's possible available to them to collect.
To follow up on the criminal angle, Don turns to an old colleague, Marty Gonzalez, chief investigator with the California Insurance Fraud Department.
Stage collisions are very prevalent, not only here in California and in the Los Angeles area, but in a lot of states all over the United States. And the reason they're done is, bottom line, is money.
But even if Marty's sure that this is a staged accident, he also knows how hard it will be to prove it.
Basically, the way they work is there's a person, commonly known as a stager, who has an in with a lawyer or a doctor, typically the lawyer, and this lawyer will pay this person to bring them cases. The stager's job is to go out and plan these accidents and recruit people who are willing to participate and be in the car when it's going to get hit at 60, 70 miles an hour by another car, or by a large truck, or a big rig. And they go out and they plan the accidents.
While Marty investigates possible criminal rings having links with staged accidents, Don receives the mechanical report. The examination of each vehicle involved in the crash shows nothing unusual. The same day, the autopsy report also comes in. Even for the two veterans, the details are extremely disturbing.
When I attended the autopsy, the medical examiner told me that the mom and the child did not die as a result of being hit in the rear by the bus. They died as a result of the fire that erupted after the crash. And the medical examiner told me that because there was still basically soot inside the trachea, which means that they were trying to breathe. And I was hopeful that it was an instantaneous event, but in this case, it was not.
Typically, there are three problems. One is that the amount of oxygen in the air in a closed space fire decreases because the fire is consuming so much oxygen. The second problem is that oftentimes in car accidents, when things are on fire, they release chemicals into the air that can injure the lungs directly. And lastly, the heat from the smoke and the heat of the environment can cause direct thermal damage to the lungs themselves.
The car doesn't burn for no reason except in the movies. Here, Laura and her son were particularly unlucky. The bus hit the back of the car, and that's where the fuel tank's located. It ripped the fuel tank open. Fuel and air and a source of heat, probably from the bus, the engine, the brakes, something like that, caused the fire. This chain of events coming together left Laura and Jason with little chance of survival.
As the weeks go by, the chances of finding the suspect vehicle begin to rapidly decline. Don and Marty exhaust every angle of the investigation, going over the crash scene reconstruction, looking for anything that they might have missed. But the case is also widely covered by the media, and that's how police get the break they've been hoping for, an anonymous tip.
Yeah, hi, Marty.
There was a lot of publicity on TV about the accident because of the fire, and it was not too long after that the police department received a call from an anonymous person saying that they believed that the accident was staged, that it was done on purpose, and they knew the people that were doing it.
With all of the roadway evidence, the statements given by Miss Albright and Dave Peterson, and now the tip-off, Don and Marty are certain they're on the right track. But they are about to tackle the hardest part of their job. They must prove who was behind the wheel and that he or she intentionally set up the crash.
We utilize a variety of investigative methods, some with information from insurance companies or other law enforcement agencies. Sometimes we end up having the opportunity to do undercover investigations, and those are obviously very beneficial to us because we can be right there with the suspects and we're getting firsthand information, whether they're making admissions to the person thinking the undercover officer is a friend or a co-criminal, so to speak. It's some of the best kind of evidence we can get.
The investigation leads to Norman Miller, a young man from the area who has been involved in staged accident cases before. Over the course of the next few months, the undercover agent reports back with names, dates, and even a boastful admission from the suspect that he had messed up the accident that killed Laura and Jason. The operation is closing in on Norman Miller, but one key element is missing: the car Miller used to commit his crime.
When I looked at the yellow and black marks on the right front bumper of the motorhome, I measured the height of it and I measured the length of it because I wanted to find a bumper that was the same height and the same distance between the various marks.
This information on the exact dimensions of the bumper becomes critical when the investigation finally leads authorities to the discovery of the suspect vehicle in a remote parking lot. The red car fits perfectly with Peterson's description. Feeling the heat, Norman Miller flees the state, but the police eventually track him down in Arizona. With all the pieces of the puzzle in place, Don Carroll can finally say exactly how this tragic chain of events unfolded. On a sunny afternoon, accident stager Norman Miller spots a motorhome, which he believes has all the makings of a lucrative accident. Moments later, he pulls in front of the motorhome and stops, causing the rear-end collision he hoped for. However, this also causes a collision with two vehicles behind the motorhome, resulting in the death of Laura Smith and her young son, Jason. After months of investigation, Officer Don Carroll accumulates the evidence necessary to bring Miller to trial. The case against Norman Miller is rock solid, and he ultimately acknowledges his role in the accident. He pleads guilty to manslaughter and is sentenced to 11 years in jail for the death of Laura and Jason Smith.
Somebody that slam on their brakes in front of another car to try to cause a crash is the lowest of the low.
People just do really crazy and stupid things for the sake of a few dollars.
Coming up, investigators work tirelessly to shed some light on the circumstances surrounding the death of a grandmother.
You immediately make associations with people you know, so it got very close to the heart.
Hit and runs are difficult crimes to solve. We're looking for evidence on the body, off the roadway, and when we find the car, we'll be looking for it there too. Paint chips are a big clue. Stuff off the body and off the road are going to give us clues like DNA and microscopic evidence. You may want to run, you may not be able to hide. Once they find the car, we're going to be able to tie this vehicle to that wreck pretty much every time.
It's Kevin Polensky's 5th birthday, and his entire family has gathered to celebrate at a local restaurant. But just as they're ready to bring out the birthday cake, Nadia, the grandmother, realizes that she has forgotten the candles. She excuses herself and hurries next door to buy a box at the convenience store. But after about 20 minutes, Nadia still hasn't returned. The family begins searching up and down the roadside outside the restaurant, calling Nadia's name. After searching the neighborhood for nearly an hour, it becomes obvious that she's nowhere to be found. All her son Alex can do now is contact the police to report a missing person. Later that afternoon, officers answer a call from a pair of local teenagers who claim to have found a dead body. It's lying on the side of the road a short distance from the restaurant where the Polenskys celebrated earlier that day. Accident investigator Lenny Simpson is immediately called in to head up the investigation.
When I arrived at the scene, I saw the body of an elderly lady. Didn't take long at all for the police to link the missing person, Nadia Polensky, with the body that was found at the scene. It was obvious that this was not a mugging, it was not an assault, it was a hit and run.
Police catalog more than 100 pieces of evidence at the crash site, including the packet of candles.
Her body was so deformed from injury, you immediately make associations with people you know and with family members you know. So it got very close to the heart.
Nadia's body is found on the other side of the parking lot, several hundred meters away from the restaurant and the convenience store. The family is devastated and can't explain why she would have crossed the road or wandered away.
We don't know if she became confused, disoriented, or what occurred, but she did not go directly back to the restaurant. She attempted to cross the street, and when she crossed the street, that's when she was struck.
After speaking with the family in more detail, Lenny learns that Nadia Polensky suffered from a number of medical conditions, including severe hypertension.
While talking to the family, I questioned them as to whether she had any health problems. They explained that she had had a stroke several years prior, and that she didn't have too much of a problem being disoriented. However, occasionally she did become disoriented.
Especially the elderly suffer from transient ischemic events in their brain where they sort of have a stroke-like situation where they get disoriented and are not sure where they are, and maybe their speech slurs, and maybe that's what happened here.
If in fact Nadia suffered a mini-stroke, this would explain why she wandered off, and it could completely change the circumstances of the crash.
We look at all the information, we look at all the possibilities, and one of the possibilities that we look at is if Mrs. Polensky was possibly down on her knees or even laying down when this vehicle struck her.
It would be very hard for a driver to hit a standing person and not realize it. But unknowingly running over a small body like Nadia's while she's lying down on the ground is a reasonable scenario. These two possibilities would have very different consequences for the driver.
Me and my partner.
Establishing Nadia's position at the moment of impact is crucial. The autopsy results and the evidence on the car that hit her could provide the physical evidence needed to answer many of these questions.
Okay, this is all about injuries. We're looking at this crash for injury patterns. On this particular dummy, what we're going to see is marks on the back, marks on his buttocks, down the legs. This is going to indicate that this dummy was standing up, and you can see here with bumper scuffs, hit from behind when the car came through, as opposed to, for example, laying down or sitting in the roadway. You'd have a different set of injuries. And of course, we tied those things to marks on the car. You'd be able to tell which way he was facing, how he was moving, whether he was sitting or standing or even walking or running when he was hit.
I have got measurements. Now I have to find the vehicle to make that comparison with.
While officers begin collecting and documenting the broken car parts, Lenny examines the crash scene itself. And he doesn't have to look very hard to find a lucky lead.
Lucky? The only thing the driver didn't leave is their driver's license. The tire mark itself was an exceptional, unusual piece of physical evidence that helped us solve this case.
Lenny also has a good idea about how the tire marks were made.
Tire mark came from the right front tire of the vehicle. The impact was significant enough that it bent the metal into the tire. The tire then began marking the roadway very shortly after the impact occurred. And this tire mark continued from the impact approximately 2 miles to the driveway and the residence of Mr. Richard Kelly. We served the search warrant on the house, and once we served the search warrant, we opened the garage door, and there was the car. It had the damage that was consistent with damage of a pedestrian impact, and it was also the tire mark leading right to the tire. Right to the tire.
Finding the car moves the investigation into overdrive. Lenny immediately looks for physical evidence on the vehicle, not only to link it to the collision, but also to establish if Nadia was standing or not when she was hit.
We also, under further examination, found clothing fibers that looked very similar to what Mrs. Polinsky was wearing. We also found blood. We found hair. And we found marks on the car that were consistent, again, with a pedestrian being struck.
But despite the preponderance of evidence, locating the car is just a first step. Next, investigators must put a driver behind the wheel.
Just because you have the car doesn't mean the case is closed. What you have to establish now is who was driving the car at the time the impact occurred.
Lenny runs a check on the license and learns that the car belongs to the owner of the house, Richard Kelly. Interrogated about the damage to his car, Kelly admits that he thinks he may have hit a dead animal on the road. The physical evidence is immediately sent to a forensic lab for a complete analysis.
We would do comparisons, DNA comparisons, as well as fiber comparisons, to help us determine that this was, in fact, the vehicle that did the striking.
Then something else catches Lenny's attention that strikes him as suspicious.
The entire front bumper of the car was gone. We didn't see it at the scene. We certainly didn't find it at the house. We didn't know where the bumper was, but it was missing.
The evidence on the scene leaves investigators skeptical of Kelly's story. But given Nadia's medical history, Lenny needs to keep in mind that she may have been lying on the ground or even already dead when the vehicle hit her. Without concrete proof one way or the other, the entire case could ultimately be ruled an unfortunate accident. Coming up, Nadia's autopsy report provides key answers and sends Lenny on a hunt for new clues.
I had to absolutely do the best I could ever do to resolve and solve this case.
A birthday celebration turns into a nightmare when the body of 70-year-old Nadia Polinsky is discovered on the side of a road. Accident investigator Lenny Simpson believes he's found the car that hit the grandmother, but he still can't say if she was standing, laying down, or even dead when she was hit. He'll have to wait for the autopsy report to find out.
tire marker is
Meanwhile,
right there.
Lenny must put a driver behind the wheel of the suspected vehicle. He continues to search the inside of Kelly's car for more clues.
We found a cell phone. We also found a receipt from the restaurant. The restaurant receipt that we found inside the car on the console had the restaurant name, it had the date, and it had the time. The time that the credit card was used to pay for the meal.
The credit card belongs to Richard Kelly. This is a very important clue. It places Kelly at a restaurant located only 6 kilometers from the scene just a short time before Nadia was hit.
We went to the restaurant. We had a photograph of Kelly. I was able to talk with the waitress that actually waited on Mr. Kelly. She positively identified him as being the person that she had waited on, that he had had somewhere between 5 and 6 beers to drink in a short period of time. And what we were also able to establish is that he was there with a woman. This woman could have been the last person to see Kelly driving the car before the impact occurred.
Following his instinct, Lenny wonders if maybe Kelly called the mysterious woman before they met at the restaurant.
We subpoenaed the records for the cell phone, and we were able to establish who Mr. Kelly called, what time they called, and what date they called.
The phone record check pays off. Before and after the time of the event, Kelly called the same number many times. This number belongs to Jane Thornton, Kelly's girlfriend.
I expected Jane Thornton was the woman who had lunch with Richard Kelly. And to my surprise, I found out that was not the case at all. She was at home waiting for him to come home to dinner, but he never came home. And when she found out that he was having dinner with another woman, needless to say, she became very upset.
Jane Thornton is now eager to cooperate. She informs police that Kelly did call her that day and told her he may have accidentally hit an animal. This would seem to support the theory that Kelly didn't realize he'd hit Nadia in the first place. But then Jane goes on to reveal that Kelly pleaded with her to drive by the scene and retrieve any missing car parts. This strikes Lenny Simpson as extremely suspicious. The autopsy report now becomes critical. If the evidence shows that Nadia was standing at the time of impact, it will be enough to bring a hit-and-run charge against Richard Kelly.
When you're down on the ground and you're run over, you have very different injuries than if you're standing up and you're struck by a car.
The autopsy report clearly shows Nadia's position at the time of impact. The fractures to her legs were both above the knee, suggesting a standing position at the time she was hit. Her pelvis, ribs, and skull were fractured on the left side, consistent with a collision of this nature and speed. The injuries inflicted by this violent crash are all consistent with the damage on Kelly's vehicle and responsible for Nadia Polensky's untimely death.
The autopsy report proved that she was upright, that she was not bent over, and that when she was struck, she was standing straight. It was a hit and run. It involved a death. The person who struck this woman did not stop. I knew this was going to be my career case.
The next morning, they receive a tip from a concerned neighbor.
We got a report from one of the neighbors that lives on the same street as Richard Kelly. And this neighbor explained that he had found a bumper.
Biological matter, including hair and blood, will be sent to the lab for analysis, but Lenny has no doubt about the results.
Kelly attempted to hide the bumper so that we could not have it as physical evidence. He was trying to prevent his arrest.
After a week of investigative work, Detective Lenny Simpson can finally replay the events that led to Nadia Polensky's untimely death. On that fateful afternoon, Kelly heads back to work after having lunch and several beers at a nearby restaurant. As the elderly Nadia Polensky crosses the road, Kelly slams into her, sending her body flying through the air and landing on a pile of trash by the street corner. But rather than assist the injured woman or call the authorities, Kelly drives away. Several hours later, he returns to the scene, and rather than check on his victim, he hides evidence in an attempt to cover his tracks. The autopsy report shows that Nadia Polensky died as a result of several head and spinal cord injuries. Richard Kelly is finally found guilty of a hit-and-run accident resulting in a fatal injury. He was sentenced to 5 years in jail.
It became an obsession, and that was probably because of the family. They had lost someone who was near and dear to them, and to die such a violent death was just not fair. So I felt compelled. I had to absolutely do the best I could ever do to resolve and solve this case.
Coming up, a reconstructionist faces one of the hardest cases of his career when he's called on to investigate a car crash involving his best friend.
Despite my emotional feelings in this, I knew I had to continue with this investigation and complete it.
Accident investigators are used to dealing with bloody scenes, dead bodies all the time. But there's nothing like investigating the death of a fellow officer. It's like investigating the death of a family member. And there's no one that can do that job but the accident investigator himself.
At the end of a long day, Officer Marty Keene is patrolling a quiet neighborhood waiting for his shift to end. Everything seems to be going smoothly when suddenly, something catches his eye in the rearview mirror. He swings a quick U-turn and drives back in the direction he came from. As it turns out, Officer Keene has stumbled onto a major car accident involving 2 vehicles, one of which has caught fire. He can't wait for emergency personnel to arrive. The burning vehicle could explode at any minute, and he must get the driver out fast. As medics arrive on the scene, the passenger from the other car staggers out into the street, but the driver is not responding.
Yo, we got help here.
Officer Keene is transported to the hospital along with the crash victims. However, for driver Fred Niedermeyer, it's too late. He's pronounced dead at the scene.
Responding to the scene of a 2-car accident, my dispatcher advised me that my best friend Marty tried to save one of the drivers in the accident when the vehicle caught on fire, and he suffered smoke inhalation and had to be transported to the hospital himself. Marty Keene, he's my best friend. I've known him for about 8 years. He's the one that got me into doing the accident investigation.
In fires, there are 2 things that happen. You obviously can have direct thermal injuries where your actual tissues are burned up. But what most people die of in fires is smoke inhalation. And there's sort of 2 things that are going on. One is that you can breathe in smoke, which depending on what's burning can have toxic chemicals in it. And the second thing that happens is fire's hot. And so what you can be breathing in is very, very hot air. And what that can do, and often how people die in, say, flash fires or very, very hot fires, is they take in one breathful of hot air and their larynx swells shut, so they can't get any more air in, and that's how they die.
As he arrives at the scene, Officer Jones receives more alarming news about the crash.
It turned out that the driver of one of the cars was another one of our police officers named Tommy Erickson. Despite my emotional feelings in this, I knew I had to continue with this investigation and complete it. With Marty in the hospital, there was no one left. We were the only 2 accident investigators.
Officer Jones is immediately faced with several critical questions. Were drugs or alcohol involved? Could this event have been caused by a mechanical failure? Or was one of the drivers at fault? All of these answers will be hard to come by and could have major ramifications for the drivers and their families.
I've responded to many accidents before, many serious accidents, but I've never actually had one involving a coworker or even my best friend at this point.
The first thing Officer Jones notices is that both vehicles are in the same lane. Sheriff Erickson's car is sitting on the curb, while the other vehicle has come to rest in the middle of the lane, facing in the wrong direction.
When I looked at Tommy's car, it was up against the curb. The front end was smashed on it, and it looked like some fire damage to the front end. I looked over to my left, and I saw this small black car on the wrong side of the road in the lane it looked like Tommy was traveling in. And my first impression, it was a head-on collision.
But as Officer Jones examines the stretch of roadway behind Sheriff Erickson's car, he observes some peculiar skid marks that are not consistent with a head-to-head crash.
Normally in a situation like this, when it is a true head-on collision, the marks would just be straight. They wouldn't be on an angle like they were on. How about the other car?
Then Robert notices something else unusual. While Tommy's car has left strange angled skid marks, he can't find any signs of braking from the other vehicle at all. This is very puzzling. Why on earth would Niedermeyer just plow straight into Erickson's car head-on? Tragically, Robert will never have the opportunity to ask his colleague Tommy Erickson about the crash. The sheriff is pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital.
When the officer told me that Tommy had died, I was devastated, but I wasn't totally surprised. After the examination of the car, it was difficult for me to understand how anybody could have survived the impact that he suffered on the steering wheel.
As Officer Jones crawls around the scene looking for physical evidence, he discovers tiny gouge marks in the roadway.
Anytime there is a severe impact, you usually have gouge marks because the front end of a car will go down and will actually impact the surface, and it'll cause it to dig in and cause these gouge marks. And it generally tells you the direction the car was coming from or the direction the car was at the time of the impact.
But the gouge marks that Robert sees here are not making sense. From what he can tell, the car that made these gouge marks could not possibly have been involved in a head-to-head crash.
The undercarriage of this car had drug the asphalt in a way that was not consistent with a head-on collision. I thought this was very important to this investigation.
The positions of the cars tell Robert that it was a head-on collision, but the minimal brake marks and the gouges in the road suggest otherwise. Robert hopes that the vehicle inspection will shed some light on this physical evidence and the possibility of mechanical failure. But for now, Robert has immediate concerns. He heads to the hospital to check on his partner and the one surviving victim. After a troubling day with many unanswered questions, he's finally given some good news. His partner, Officer Marty Keene, is still unconscious, but recovering from his injuries in intensive care. Expecting to find the one surviving passenger in critical condition, Officer Jones is amazed to see him sleeping peacefully. His name is Arthur Curtis, and his chart notes that he has only suffered one minor injury, a broken nose.
I was a little surprised when I found out that Arthur had just had a broken nose. Seeing how both drivers had died in this collision, something just didn't seem right to me.
The interview with Arthur Curtis provides more clues.
I could smell alcohol on his breath. I asked him if Fred Niedermeyer had been drinking also. And Curtis told me that they had both come from a bar right down the street from where the accident happened. The toxicology report indicated that Fred Niedermeyer had consumed quite a bit of alcohol. His blood alcohol level was a 0.18, which is considerably over the legal limit.
The blood alcohol content could explain the lack of brake marks from Niedermeyer's car. Perhaps he was just too drunk to react to the oncoming vehicle. It may also shed some light as to why Niedermeyer ended up in Sheriff Erickson's lane. But it still doesn't explain why the passenger, Arthur Curtis, only suffered a minor injury, or why Erickson reacted to the oncoming car so late.
It appears that Tommy just locked the brakes up and tried to turn away from it just right at the last minute, like he never saw it coming. I had a hard time trying to figure that out.
Next, Officer Jones gets Fred Niedermeyer's autopsy results. It notes that Niedermeyer was not wearing his seatbelt, leaving his body unprotected against the violent shock of the crash, resulting in a lacerated aorta.
Car A hits car B, and all that force from car A gets transferred to person in car B. The bodies inside the car keep moving and hit something inside the car, and then the organs inside the bodies keep moving and hit something inside the body. So it's boom, boom, boom.
Well, that crash was only at 35. Imagine if it was a lot faster, like Sheriff Erickson's. In every crash, there are 3 collisions. The first one's between the car parts. The next one is bodies striking structures inside the cars like the steering wheel and the dash. The last one is where body parts strike internal body parts like the ribs. Your heart and your lungs striking the ribs can cause blunt force trauma. That can lead to internal bleeding, and that's what killed Sheriff Erickson.
Coming up, inspecting the undercarriage of the car yields new evidence.
I placed the black car, Fred Niedermeyer's car, up on the rack to inspect the suspension components and to also find out what caused the gouge marks in the road.
An off-duty sheriff is involved in a deadly car crash that kills him and another driver. The resting position of the car suggests that it was a head-on collision. But the rest of the physical evidence says otherwise, creating a real mystery for the investigator. As a first step, Officer Jones needs to run a complete mechanical check on the vehicles and document the damage from the crash.
I'm driving over to the garage now to do the vehicle autopsies on the two vehicles involved in that crash. Right now, the best evidence I have are the 3 gouge marks in the road. I want to look underneath that vehicle and find out what caused those gouge marks.
The brakes and operating systems check out okay, so mechanical failure is ruled out. But the question remains, why would 2 cars collide head-on with virtually no attempt to avoid each other? Officer Jones's next job is to painstakingly match the marks on the road with the cars and parts that caused them. This giant jigsaw puzzle should give him a fairly accurate sense of the crash dynamics. While inspecting the undercarriage of Fred Niedermeyer's car, he finds his first important piece of the puzzle.
What I discovered is the marks right here in the suspension are what caused the gouge marks. There's actually pieces of asphalt still on the metal components underneath this car. When I looked at the gouge marks again and saw the angle they were coming on, I was able to determine that Fred Niedermeyer's car was actually coming on an angle and not directly head on.
Right there.
This is a major breakthrough in the case. With Niedermeyer's angled gouge marks and the offset skid marks from Erickson's car, Robert now has a clear idea of where the cars were at the time of the impact.
It appeared to me that Fred Niedermeyer was actually making a left turn or making a long sweeping turn into a driveway access, and he turned right in the path of Tommy. That explains to me why Tommy never reacted to this crash.
The force generated in a head-on collision would have been so violent that no one would likely have survived the crash. This left turn finding explains why the passenger in Niedermeyer's car wasn't more severely injured. The impact was absorbed primarily on the driver's side, leaving the passenger side mostly free of this deadly force.
The evidence left by the skid marks indicate that Tommy actually swerved to the right just before the collision.
This discovery puts Niedermeyer clearly at fault. But one mystery still remains. If it was a left-turn collision, how did Niedermeyer's car end up in the opposite lane facing Erickson, creating the illusion of a head-on crash?
Tommy's car was actually 10 miles an hour faster and 1,000 pounds more than Fred's car. And that explains why Fred's car went so far backwards and wound up in the lane that Tommy was originally driving.
It was this weight and speed disparity and the resulting backwards movement that made the crash look like a head-on collision. The pieces are all coming together for Officer Jones. This new theory explains the victim's injury patterns and the absence of roadway evidence, as neither driver had much time to react to the other's vehicle. With the final piece of the puzzle in place, Officer Jones can now replay the events that led to this unfortunate tragedy. Fred Niedermeyer and Arthur Curtis spend the afternoon drinking beers at a local bar.
Wow, cut their heads off.
Soon after leaving, Niedermeyer slows down to make a left turn but fails to check for oncoming traffic. The impact of the collision lifts Niedermeyer's car off the ground, pushes it backward, causing it to land in the center of the lane facing in the wrong direction. The pieces all fit together for Officer Robert Jones, but the solution only came after a lengthy and emotionally draining investigation. Thankfully, Marty Keene eventually makes a full recovery, but sadly, both officers' thoughts are with the relatives of Sheriff Erickson and Fred Niedermeyer. No criminal charges were filed in this case.
This accident was an emotional struggle for me because a coworker was killed in the accident. A friend of mine was injured in the accident. Once I completed my investigation, I was relieved to find out that Tommy wasn't at fault in any way, shape, or form in this accident.
This was a difficult case for Robert on a number of levels, professionally and emotionally. Don't be fooled by that appearance of callousness and coolness the accident investigators show. Deep down, remember, they're human beings as well. They care about getting that guy off the road that deserves to be off the road because they drive as well and so do their families.